Good morning, everybody, and welcome to CXO Online Uncut. My name is Hamish Taylor, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. I am not an oil and gas man myself, despite living on the east coast of Scotland. But I have been a customer, I guess, through my career of your industry in a variety of guises. I started off in consumer goods, where I was involved in household cleaning a lot with Procter & Gamble. And then later on, I was in the airline industry as head of brands at British Airways. I then moved into chief executive roles at Eurostar, high-speed trains through the Channel Tunnel, linking England to France and to Belgium. And then I ran a bank after that. So in some of my roles, I've been a customer, but that's not what today is about. Today is about a session where we can be part of a series, bringing you thought leaders from around the world who really do know something about oil and gas, unlike me. I'm just here to ask the questions. So many of you will be familiar with the CXO live events, where you get a chance to get together, whether it's in Houston or Dallas or wherever, and actually meet with your peer group and be able to talk to them about particular topics and share experiences. Clearly, in the current climate, we can't do that, but we can do the next best thing, which is online events to try and at least get some sort of conversation going. And for today's event, what we're going to do is concentrate on the new working environment. And in particular, the new working environment and its impact on the world of oil, gas, renewables, and in particular, looking at the adoption of new technologies and the impact they're having in the efficiency of areas like field service, process management, maximizing uptime, for example, obviously, as the ultimate goal. We can only do these events thanks to sponsorship. And ServiceNow have stepped up to the plate for today. We're really pleased, and we thank them hugely for that allows us to run these events. And later on today, we're going to meet with Rob Schaefer, who is the Director of Product Management at ServiceNow, and he's going to join us later. But before I introduce our first expert on the stage, I would like to just point out to you, on your screens, you will see that there is a chat icon in the top right-hand corner, the word chat, a tab there, and there's also a tab for questions. These are for you. Please do join in the conversation. It's going to get very lonely here if there's just the three of us. So if you've got any questions, if you've got any thoughts about what's going on as we go through this, please do so, okay? Get involved. And there's also for a bit of fun, there's one or two questions as well for you in the polls tab, which you'll see, which you'll get a chance to vote on as we go through. But most importantly, use the chat, use the questions. Let's join in. We've got about 40 minutes or so before we get kicked off the airtime. So without any further ado, I really ought to be trying to get our experts on stage. And the first person I'm going to bring on stage is Mark LaCour. Now, Mark has a very interesting journey getting here. This is a man with a Bachelor of Science degree in wildlife management, of all things, but then followed that up with 20 years of oil and gas experience and is now editor-in-chief of the Oil and Gas Network. So, Mark, you've no idea how relieved I am to see you come on the screen there before I finish my introduction, which is very good news. But I know I certainly haven't done justice to your background. So why don't you first up give us 60 seconds or so on your journey to where you got to today?
Yeah, so 25 years ago, I needed a job, and the local phone company gave me a job. And they gave me a book of business that no other salesperson in the entire company wanted, which was their oil and gas book of business. And so that's how I got started in the industry. Did a bunch of good work, learned a whole bunch. And then you fast forward, my last corporate gig was at Forrester Research. About 10 years ago, I started my own market research company, Modal Point. And in the process of building that business, my marketing people came to me about 6 years ago, said, let's start a podcast. And I said, that's a stupid idea. Nobody listens to those things. And obviously I was wrong. So now we sit on the top 11 oil and gas podcasts in the world. And our goal really is to help educate and inform people about this wonderful industry. So I really appreciate the time, and I appreciate y'all inviting me to this. And I'm also happy that the tech is working. So knock on wood, so far, no technology issues.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a bit odd, isn't it, if you have a discussion about the new ways of working and we can't actually make them work, which would be a bit of a problem. The worst of the lot, actually, when I do big events with information security officers, because they seem to have real problems connecting for some reason. There's the 27 passwords they're going through, I think. Look, I wanted to talk about the new ways of working. And what interests me is, as an outsider, I guess I would always have thought of the oil and gas industry as being at the forefront of engineering, highly technical industry with lots of very smart engineering people in there. And yet you talk quite a lot about the need for this industry to change and to embrace change. And I noticed when you put on your magazine at the beginning of this year, you put your predictions for 2020, I noticed. Incidentally, I noticed you did not predict COVID-19 coming along, so I'm a bit disappointed. Whether to take the rest of it or not, I really have no idea. But you did put agility and new ways of working as two of the key things that you thought. So, why do you think we need to change in this industry? And what are the biggest changes that we need to make, do you think?
Yeah, so this is one of the most high-tech engineering and project management centric industries on the planet. Don't get me wrong about that.
Yeah.
But we've always been hesitant to adopt new technologies and new processes. And the reason for that is, if you think about what we do as an industry, if I make a mistake in this industry, people die. And not only do people die, but you can have an environmental catastrophe which can destroy a company overnight. So in my industry, if I've done something the same way for 20 or 30 years and nothing's leaked, nothing's blown up, nothing's caught on fire, nobody's gotten hurt, I don't want to change that process. And that includes things like new technology. Well, and to your point, I didn't predict COVID. And if I would have predicted COVID, I don't think I could have predicted all the things that has happened around this COVID-19 lockdown. But one of the things it's doing is it's making the oil and gas industry mature. So the industry is going through a decade, 10 years worth of maturity in the next 12 months. And we have to improve efficiencies. And the number one way we can improve efficiencies in this industry is the adaptation of new technologies and new processes. And now we're being forced as an industry. We're in this double black swan event where we have, and this has never happened in the history of this industry, where you have a low crude price environment, but a decrease in demand for refined goods because the world is locked down. So as an industry as a whole, we're stuck between two rocks that we can't move, that will slowly move away, but we still have to produce the energy that the world needs. And we got to do it better, faster, and cheaper. And once again, technology is the solution to that.
And, so I understand the point. You from what I gather, you were saying we were forced to change anyway, even before the whole, remote working and lockdowns and everything came along. There was a need for this industry to develop anyway.
Correct. So if you look at what was happening in the shale fields in the U.S., they weren't very efficient with using capital. So this this environment right now where there's a bunch of mergers and acquisition and bankruptcies was going to happen anyway, except it would have been stretched out over 5 years. Because of what's going on now, that time frame has been compressed into a few months.
So where do you see the biggest changes that need to happen then?
So, geez, well, I could spend 6 hours talking about this. Anything that drives efficiencies and uptime is needed. So the old way of running a production facility is you had people that had 10, 15, 20 years worth of experience, and they knew from doing it for years, I need to turn this choke this way. I need to turn this valve this way. That doesn't exist anymore. And this new workforce that's coming into our industry is not going to work for the same company for 20 or 25 years like my generation would, right? So that's a prime place for things like machine learning, where the machines learn what is the best way to adjust all these different movements, all these different valves, chokes, whatever, to get the best production as possible and to decrease the amount of maintenance and wear on my equipment. And that's a great place for artificial intelligence as well, right? So when you have a bunch of sensors in the oil field that is then using machine learning to make sure that we optimize production and keep wear on our equipment down, then you layer artificial intelligence with that. And this is going on right now in the field. But then you end up having problems with things like connectivity. That's where things like edge computing come in. So, in the field, upstream is probably the number one place we can start driving efficiencies with technology, but it also applies to pipelines, which is midstream. It also applies to downstream refineries, right? So the industry as a whole, even things like supply chain. So regardless of what anybody will tell you in this industry, supply chain is an issue for the entire industry, and technology is a perfect solution for those type of issues.
It really surprises me, I have to say, because I would really have thought that this industry has really been, at the forefront of a lot of this stuff, rather than being a late adopter.
Yeah, well, the problem is money. So when you have a choice between adopting software and saving 3 or 4% in your accounting, or taking that same capital and drilling another well and making $1 million a day, what are you gonna do? You go drill the other well and make $1 million a day, right? We're not in that world where you can drill a well and make $1 million a day anymore.
So look, let's assume then that, yes, there is a case for saying there are opportunities for bringing in new technology. And I know from our previous conversations that you've seen things in like the automotive industry and in aerospace, where I came from, that where they have adopted new technologies probably a bit quicker than maybe we have in oil and gas. So is there anything you think we can learn from their experiences in sort of what kind of technologies they're embracing that we haven't got to yet?
What a perfect segue. The audience is going to think you and I rehearsed this, and we didn't
They would be
rehearse this. So yes. So first thing, look at aviation. Look at Department of Defense, aviation, aerospace. They understand predictive maintenance better than anybody. All of us have been stuck on a plane somewhere for an extra 30 minutes because somebody's changing a valve, right? Because they know ahead of time that valve's going to fail. That's what we need in the oil and gas industry. And we don't have that, regardless of what anybody tells you. And then I talked earlier about supply chain. Nobody does supply chain as effectively as automotive, right? When that guy on the assembly line is building this Toyota Camry and he picks up the last light bulb, the software knows he picked up the last light bulb. It goes back to their vendor saying, we need new light bulbs. It shows up just in time. And Toyota worked with the vendor to make sure you have zero defect manufacturing. So every one of those light bulbs is perfect. That's what we need as an industry.
But don't they? I mean, did they not have the same barriers as you had in terms of where to spend the money or whatever originally? I mean, what prompted them to go in there earlier than maybe oil and gas?
It's efficiencies and its margins, profit margins, right? So automotive margins are very, very slim, as opposed to in a good year for an upstream operator, your margins may be 50 or 60%. If you're a subsea manufacturer, when things were $100 a barrel, your margins were sometimes 60 or 70%, right? So when you have that type of margins, you don't need to be efficient. Well, we don't have those margins anymore. It's something that the airline industry is suffering through right now with this COVID-19 lockdown, the same way with automotive. But if you look at what they're doing is throttling back and trying to keep their key people, knowing that when things come back, they can ramp back up. Unfortunately, in oil and gas industry right now, the response is to lay people off. So not to keep them, but to lay people off. Well, a lot of the people that are going to be laid off will not come back. And once again, if you're an industry that is engineering and project management centric and you don't have enough people to do the work, what's the solution? It's technology.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, actually, because, with a lot of the businesses I've been working with, we've been looking at this whole idea of, actually survival through the current situation is a team game. It's not an individual game. If you've got no customers at the end of this, it doesn't matter if you survive, you've got no business. Equally, if you've got no supply chain at the end of this, you've got no business. So it's how you can work together. And the impression I get of what I've seen of automotive and aerospace is they don't just think as an individual company, they think of it as a complete supply chain right the way through, and they work solutions together. Is that a fair assessment?
It's very fair. Most of automotive, if you look at automotive, they don't have vendors, they have partners. And so they work with their partners. If I'm a supplier to Toyota and I need capital or I need facilities or I need robotics or whatever, Toyota works with me because Toyota realizes it can't run an efficient operation unless its partners can run an efficient operation. You're just now starting to see that in the oil and gas industry. I'm even seeing it contractually where normally what would be a vendor signs a master service agreement with a customer, say one of the big operators, but instead of agreeing on pricing, they agree upon margins. So if you and I have a contract between us and you and I agree on what my margins are, I'm not a vendor anymore. You're working with me. I'm a partner of yours, right? And at the same time, you're making sure that I make money, because if I don't make money, then I can't support what you're doing. We need more of that in this industry. And it's literally just starting because of this COVID-19 thing.
So if you look at what's sort of prompted in as you say, in the automotive and the aerospace industries, we've got, number one, they see it as a team game and they work with their partners and work right across the supply chain. As you said, there's a necessity. The margins are much smaller and therefore you absolutely have to. And I guess in our case, the whole COVID disruption has provided a bit of a necessity in the oil and gas industry then.
It's this crazy year. It's the double black swan event, right? That started off with a price war between OPEC and Russia, and we were a bit of a casualty. And then you had this COVID-19 thing happen, which locked down driving and flying and playing soccer and buying lipstick, which then hurts the downstream part of our industry. And we've never been through this before. And like I said, it's forcing the industry to change. The companies that come out of this that stay whole are going to be lean, super efficient, very open to new process, new technologies. Now, at the same time, we still have to worry about safety. Don't get me wrong about that. We're still going to be slower to adopt things than other industries because that health, safety, and environmental component. But the days of doing it the same way, because we've done it that way for 20 years, is gone.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to bring Mark in on this. Bring Rob in this in a second or two. First of all, thank you to Martin, who has put the first question up, which we will get to, I promise you, because you're first up. You'll definitely get the first question when we get onto the questions. But thank you. Follow his lead, guys. Come on, any questions you've got, throw them in on the tab for us. But But let's open the discussion up a bit broader now, and let's bring in Rob, shall we? And Rob Schaefer is going to join us, and he is the Director of Product Management for ServiceNow, our sponsors today. And he's been applying sort of these new technologies in oil and gas, where it has been adopted, but also has been working in other industries in terms of doing it over time as well. So I'm going to have a chat with Rob for a few minutes around some of the things he's seen, and then we're going to bring all three of us together and see how we can start addressing some of the questions and things that have started to come through. So, Rob, welcome. Good to see you. Now, again, it's very easy for somebody like me to say, you've been applying new technology in oil and gas for X number of years. Come on, tell us the true story. 60 seconds, give us the background.
Hey, I'm coming to you live from Pewaukee, Wisconsin. I have a degree in journalism. So, however, I've been in technology my whole career. I've supported field service organizations for over 28 years now. I've seen a lot of the best practices, a lot of, let's call them less than stellar practices as well. But I always like learning from people in different industries, all of my different customers, prospects, partners. So I've done a lot of work in regulated industries, not just oil and gas, but I've done a lot in med device, automotive, telco. Great.
Well, I mean, and I definitely want to ask you about those in a minute or two, in the same way we talked about aerospace a minute or two ago, because I think there's some really, I'm a big believer in this idea. I have to say this, I've changed industries so often during my career, I've got to believe there's something you can take from one to the next. But let's start off back in oil and gas to start with. So technology, if technology is the key to these new ways of working at the moment, from your perspective, where do you see the biggest potential for advances from your view of the world as opposed to from Mark's?
To me, we talked about, Mark talked about predictive. I think that's definitely part of it. I think we're seeing preventive maintenance evolve into just-in-time preventive maintenance, and then eventually predictive maintenance, predictive intelligence. So just-in-time says you still have that preventive maintenance plan, but that preventive maintenance plan can be applied at any stage, right? What if we determine there's an anomaly? Nothing's broken, right? But we know that because of that anomaly, within 35 days, there will be some downtime if we don't address that. 35 days is a good window to me, right? It's less expensive if I don't have to have someone there right now. Machine learning can help us get that. We can collect all of that data and we can detect those anomalies and determine what should be placed on a watch list and what needs to be addressed immediately.
Okay. And that doesn't happen at the moment?
Not to the extent it should. It's generally very flat, very planned maintenance scheduled, just like in automotive. Yeah, personally, your oil change every 3 months or 3,000 miles, whichever comes first.
Right. And what sort of new kit does this require the listeners to be thinking about? Because I know you've talked to me before about IoT devices and recording inspections and also, what actually physically do they need to be able to start doing this?
Well, as we see new technologies emerge and new products be developed, a lot of them are IoT enabled, have some type of smart component to that. That's great, but you have to be able to connect it to something to trigger those alerts, and then a workflow tool that will automatically take the appropriate action. The alert is one thing. Great, I'm alerted to it. Well, no, you need to automatically generate that work order and dispatch that technician, that appropriate technician, with the right parts, the right skills, and the right knowledge set.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, as you guys, as ServiceNow are the sponsor of this one, I think I'm allowed one naughty question. So come on, where does ServiceNow fit into all of this? What kind of work do you do with oil and gas around this stuff?
Well, quite honestly, that's what we do. So really, it's, having the tools. To me, oil and gas is a very asset-intensive system. You've got probably more complex types of assets than most industries out there, whether it's, things like the pumps or the antennas that are, at a site, the telco equipment, the computer equipment, all of that, the engines, all sorts of different skill sets that are required. And you're not going to have, hey, I've got one technician for this site. That doesn't make sense, because someone who knows how to repair an engine or a pump doesn't necessarily know how to manage the computer or the antennas or the telco equipment that's there. And I forgot your question. Oh, how do we
talk about ServiceNow and where you fit in helping organizations to do this? And it's an interesting one because, I mean, for me, when I look back at, innovation by definition is doing something you haven't done before. So why should you expect to be the experts at it? Surely you've got to expect to have to ask for some help from somebody.
Yeah. So a lot of it is around being able to document the assets and their subcomponents, right? Track the history. So great, something's broken. Well, I know how to fix it, but what if I knew that Joe was out here 3 days ago and did these 3 other things? Well, he might have actually triggered this current failure. So by knowing that, I can get to that root cause of that problem and address it that much faster as well. And then being able to document it. So we talk about uptime. Uptime's critical, absolutely. But what about the regulatory concerns as well? So you need to be able to document the process, everything that you've done, your debrief. Here's the parts, here's the time, but then here's the safety inspection checklist. Here's the, whatever different types of repair or preventive maintenance checklists. Document the conformance to your standards.
It's interesting when you say about, as you say, regulated industries. I mean, I've worked in a few regulated industries, be it railways or airlines or whatever. And I find that when I talk with organizations, quite often it almost becomes an excuse for not doing things. I do a lot of work in life sciences at the moment, pharmaceuticals with companies there. And particularly if you work with the marketing department, they'll say, well, of course, we're different because we're regulated. We can't do what we might do in your consumer goods or whatever. And it almost becomes an excuse. Whereas it's not, it's just that's the way the playing field is, guys, so work within it. Now, you talk about telco and medical devices and other regulated industries where you've looked at this specific area in those. What can we learn from them? Is there anything in that telco or medical device which are equally regulated that we can learn from how they've been adopting this?
Yeah. What I was talking about, the documentation process is certainly part of it, but being able to anticipate. An audit is just around the corner. If you've got that mindset that audit is around the corner and you say uptime's paramount, but so is safety, and that's why we're doing this documentation. Being able to visualize the audit of a site, a piece of equipment, or even an individual field on a piece of equipment, and from there actually perform mock audits. So some organizations in med device space, for example, or financial services will have an internal mock auditor, and they'll just have random audits assigned, and they'll go around and they'll meet with different people and they'll initiate an audit.
There's an interesting philosophy around audit, actually. I did some work recently with some auditors in another industry, and I took them I took them through a training course for how to be a referee at the sport of rugby. Now, I don't know if either of you are familiar with rugby at all, but rugby refereeing is very different from most sports. In most sports, the referee's job is to blow the whistle when you do something wrong. Traditional, almost checklist, you've done something wrong, we blow the whistle, or in football, you throw the flag in, or whatever it's going to be, okay? In rugby, you can't do that because they're all trying to cheat all of the time. So the rugby referee's job is to keep the game moving. And you talk to the players the whole time, and they understand that your job is to keep them moving, not to actually stop them what they can't do. And I think there's an analogy there back into audit and risk management and things like that is how do we turn it into a positive so that people don't resist it in the organization? They see it actually as helping them to do their job better.
You need to make the audit process something that complements your business. And while it's hard to get away from viewing the auditor as the bad guy coming in, right? You've got to do what's in your best interests to be the best prepared and recognize the outcome is better quality, better safety, and the end result is actually better profitability as well.
Yeah, that's right. Because I mean, I was talking to some IT security guys in one of these forums the other day, and I said, stop calling it, risk management or whatever. It's actually about business resilience, isn't it? It's actually about this is the way to move your business forward.
Right.
Or sorting out what you need to do around security or whatever.
Perspective.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to get on to some of the people bits because with the two questions we've had in so far relate to people as well. So I want to kick off with that. I want to bring Mark back in now and so we can have a chat with us all. And let's just start with the people generally first, and then we'll take the two questions that have come through. So if technology adoption is crucial, and you're both saying it's crucial, and you're both giving some really good examples of how others do it and why we should do it, what are the implications outside the technology piece? What are the implications for talent and recruitment and people in all of this? Because Mark, you touched on that a little bit in your opening spiel.
Yeah. So one of the things our industry is facing right now that nobody's talking about is this enormous talent shortage that's coming at us like a freight train, and we cannot get out of the way. The number one job that nobody can hire for in the industry right now, even during COVID-19, is data scientist. Well, if I'm a data scientist and I have a choice to go work for an oil and gas company or go work for Amazon, guess who I'm gonna pick, right? And even things like engineers, everybody thinks of petroleum engineers or geophysicists, but we need mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, reciprocating engineers. Other industries are beating us to that talent. And if you think about what the oil and gas industry does, whether it's upstream, midstream, or downstream, everything is engineering and project management. What happens as an industry when we can't hire engineers and project managers? Then on top of all of that, this new younger workforce that's coming in wants to learn, wants new experiences. So no matter how much I pay them, if I'm a super major, they're not going to stick with me for 30 years. Well, Exxon's core competency is that they have engineers that have 25, 30 years of experience. They're really good. What happens when you lose that base of that type of engineering experience? This industry is going to have to change, whether it wants to or not.
And Rob, you've got a degree in environment and whatever. So I'm going to ask you this question: how do you persuade that younger generation to come into a thing like the oil and gas industry? Because amongst that generation, there's obviously debate about how environmentally friendly it is, etc. So you're a wildlife man. How would you persuade these youngsters that actually it is a great industry to be in?
So first thing, as an industry, we need to raise our hand and says this negative public perception that we're suffering right now is our own fault. For the last 75 years, when anybody says something bad about our industry, we don't raise our hand and correct them. I'll give you a perfect example. So when ExxonMobil built their corporate headquarters, their global headquarters in right outside of Houston, Texas in spring, when they cleared the land, they took 3/4 of the trees that they cleared, put them in cold storage, and paid a team of tree doctors to keep those trees alive for 2 years. And when they finished construction, they went back to landscape everything, they replanted those trees. Even ExxonMobil's own employees don't know that story. Right. Yeah. So we have not done a good job of telling great stuff about our industry, and we have to own that. And now when you layer the reach of social media that's been around for 10 years, now one person that either intentionally or unintentionally doesn't know what they're talking about can now reach millions of people. And once again, as an industry, we need to understand how to work with that. And we're just starting to get there, but we're a decade behind.
Yeah. Rob, from a wildlife manager's standpoint, how do we persuade these youngsters it's a good industry to come into?
Well, I would say, first of all, I would compare your own personal experience to the persona of the incoming generation, right? Yeah. I didn't learn about Excel spreadsheets. And by the way, none of them want to learn about Excel spreadsheets, but I didn't learn about Excel spreadsheets till 1985. In fact, even before that, it was Microsoft Works or whatever, right? Understand the modern tools that these people grew up on. They're all using their phones, or they're using their game systems, or, right? So they knew Slack 10 years. In fact, when my kids were in grade school and they would go to classes, computer classes, I'd say, well, what are the cool, toys or computer systems that you're learning? And every fourth one that they used, I'm like, I need to learn that. I need to incorporate that into my work life. So they're using a myriad of tools that we just don't understand necessarily. We need to make sure they know that our company is modern enough, and I'm not talking about ServiceNow, I'm just talking about the Slacks and those types of tools to begin with.
So where does that take us in terms of leadership then? I'm going to bring in Martin's question here. Martin Chabaria has asked a question. He says, who do you therefore see leading this type of transformation? Traditional IT or operational technology? And how do you see this convergence allowing an organization to adapt to a new technology rapidly? So, we can say these people are coming in with the skills, but those of us that have been around for a while, presumably we're the ones who have to lead it and integrate this stuff. So do we have the ability to do that?
Yes, but let me tell you, it's not IT. So in the oil and gas industry, most companies use a chargeback model. So basically, IT bills me as a business for the work they do, and then I don't really know what they do. And so they tell me they're doing this SAP implementation in 2 years for $3 million, and it takes 4 years and $8 million. Now I don't like my own IT department, right? And so, and you'll have IT and oil and gas say, well, we want to be brought to the table as a business partner. Well, you need to learn the business, not routers and switches and cybersecurity. And once again, that's starting to happen. But the interesting thing is the last couple of years is the operational technology of the side of the house, which is not IT. So the OT guys are not the ones back in town or back in corporate making sure your laptop works. These guys are out in the field in a truck in West Texas trying to make a sensor talk through an LTE connection and get it back to the cloud. Those are the ones that are leading the change because they see the business of oil and gas. They understand the health, safety, and environmental impact, but they also understand the technology, and they also understand how the right technology in the right place solves a problem that removes a person from that equation, which makes it better for everybody. So it's really, if you're not in oil and gas, it looks bizarre because you have this group of technologists which are very pro-business and understand things which are moving the needle, and you have this other big group with a much bigger budget which are being dragged along. They don't want to go down there. So it's not IT, it's the operational technology people.
And you'll see organizations have resources that really bridge that because they still need to get the support from IT and get some advice from IT as well, right?
Yeah.
But the operational team really needs to be able to make those decisions and lead with that.
I think it's an interesting challenge, and hopefully, Isaac, from your question and comments here, it's starting to answer some of that. Isaac made a comment about, are most oil and gas companies looking to innovate through the lens of IT? How influential is IT during these challenges, which I think we've started to address, hopefully, in your last few comments. And, the truth is, if I'm the director of sales in a company, I want to have a conversation about hitting my sales target, not about your technology. And unless IT can come and talk sales language, I'm probably not listening in the way that I should be listening. And I think there's a new skill set coming in the IT community generally around kind of what I call brand management for IT, if you like, which is almost learning about the relationships and selling benefits to other people rather than just understanding the technology. And I think that's huge implications for who you recruit into IT functions in the future as well.
Yeah, it's the culture of IT and oil and gas is in the process of changing. I mean, it's needed to change for 20 years, but it's once again, because of what's going on now, there's no choice. They will change.
Mm-hmm. Good. So I was just looking on, seeing what's on the chat box here. People seem to be violently agreeing with you. Good. Right. Okay. Let's get back to the questions. Isaac has asked a second one. He says, what are the traditional objections that oil and gas will throw against innovation? And what are the ways to get around such objections? Now, Mark, you talked a little bit about that to begin with. So I'm going to go to Rob on this one first and just say, Rob, what objections have you met? You're going in with all these smart ideas. You've got these, the devices you've got the predictive maintenance abilities. You're going in with a bits of smart kit with some really exciting ideas. What objections do you meet?
Well, show me where that's going to reduce headcount. Show me where that's going to, right, which kind of ties pretty closely back to what Mark was saying earlier as well, right? They all want to tie it back to that, and it can. Mm-hmm. You have to dig into the value as if it was like a root cause analysis, right? Think of if this goes down, right? If there's downtime, well, what are the ramifications of that? Well, the ramifications are maybe we miss some output deliverables, right? And through that, maybe we have to pay some contractual penalties, or I'm not sure of all that, but get down into that value. And because of all that, maybe we can't reduce that headcount, or maybe we have to hire extra people that we don't want to because of these scenarios.
But I think the interesting thing for me is the conversation you have in there is not about the technology. It's about the benefits. It's about what it does for your maintenance budgets. It's about predictive. And I think that I agree with I think it was Isaac was saying it earlier on. There is a tendency to treat IT and innovation as being part of the same thing. When I speak at innovation conferences, they're actually IT conferences a lot of the time. And I'm trying to say, as the token non-techie walking in there, I'm trying to say, guys, that's not what it's about. When I put beds in aeroplanes, it wasn't an IT project, guys. It was about what we could do to get first-class passengers in. But IT happened to be the technology that enabled us to do it.
Well, and there's a disconnect, an inherent disconnect between those departments, if you will. And so those smarter organizations will start to bridge those gaps and foster those relationships so that you've got the operational team that is more tech savvy as well, that can better communicate with the IT department and the rest of the organization, the sales and the marketing and everything else, right?
So who do we need to talk to get this moving then? Do we need to talk to more to the service people, the field people, rather than assuming that when you go in, you talk to an IT contact?
Yeah, so if you're selling a technology product or solution, you should never talk to IT first. You need to talk to business first. And there's a couple of reasons. First thing is IT never has discretionary budget, right? Every year they're asked to do more with less, and they're scared. And please no hate mail. I love you, IT people. I come from a technology background, oil and gas. But the truth is, every year they're scared. Every year they're asked to do more with less, right? And so if you bring a solution to IT and the business takes notice of it, IT's go, no, we can do it. Well, they can't, right? But they're scared. As opposed to you go to the business. So even in this COVID-19 lockdown, if you go to the North American operations manager at Halliburton, I guarantee you he probably has $10 to $20 million of discretionary spend in his budget to look at new things, new projects, new processes, new hires, all that sort of stuff. And so if you have a technology solution, the first thing you do is you find a business champion in the organization. Now, you're still going to have to talk to IT, but walking in IT with the business behind you saying we're going to do this is a different conversation than walking into IT and trying to get them to get involved in the beginning.
Now, just because they say we don't have the funds doesn't mean the funds aren't there. There's a concept called alternative use of funds, right? So if another department has this big budget, right, if we've got a better case, and that ties back to the value statements I was saying earlier, those organizations, that department may be able to leverage that other budget, that other team's budget, an alternate use of funds. Yeah, you've got to have a strong value case.
Absolutely. I think Hemmer has been putting in some comments as we've been going through this and talks about partnership and making the lines blur between functions. And that's absolutely right, because it's about the business. It's about the business improvement we want. And if that means a combination of IT and service, field service and everybody else, then that's what it should be. But I do think, though, there's a huge opportunity for the IT community here, because it is the technology that is going to drive these business benefits in the long term. So without the technology, we can't drive the business benefits. So when IT make that translation and actually start talking, as many of you do, I'm sure already, talk the business language, you've got the opportunity to be absolutely the heroes of the future and the leaders. 10 years ago, it used to be around my executive table, I'd be listening to my people person, obviously, very family, and my customer person, because they were the technology's right up there now, the IT person, because you guys have absolutely got the key to the future, I believe.
Well, Mark has also stated earlier that we've always done it this way, right? And since, by the way, we haven't had any safety issues or downtime, we're not going to fix it. But it's also, business doesn't always know what's in the realm of possibilities, and IT often has more visibility into what can be done technically. So by fostering that stronger communication, that better relationship between those departments, if IT brings something, I'm not quite sure, this might help solve this problem you have, that you've always done it this way, and their minds are blown because they didn't know that was in the realm of possibilities.
So,
there's also
sorry, we're going to have to finish in a minute. So what I'd like to do, just as a final sort of thing with you, is to ask, okay, moving forward then, okay, you've got an audience out there that are listening in their organizations. If you were to give a couple of pieces of advice to those organizations about what you would like, what you think they should be doing or could do, or you would advise them to do over the next few months as they think about this, what would be the first steps you think people should be taking? Mark, do you want to go first? To add in your other comment you're going to make first, if you want to.
No, that's actually a great question. The biggest thing is literally showing business value, but showing business value that's important to the business. So you could take the same technology solution. Let's say it saves time in some production process, right? Well, if I go take that same technology solution to the C-suite, I'm talking shareholder value to them, right? So if I can reduce this time it takes doing this, it increases shareholder value. You take that same solution to a portfolio manager that saves time, and you go, look, I can help you hit your project milestones on time, right? So the same solution is a different conversation, a different business conversation, depending on who you're talking to in the organization. You might be talking to the frontline guy in the field and go, look, this solution that saves time allows you to get home to your family quicker. So one of the mistakes I see a lot of companies make is they have their elevator pitch, their value statement, you have to talk business, real business objectives in this industry.
Absolutely. And I've just seen, so there's a comment gone up on there about, business architecture, it should always drive the technology architecture. Yeah, it's a business issue that you've got going. Rob, what about you? A couple of thoughts for?
Yeah. First of all,
apart from getting on the phone to service now, what else should they do?
Yeah, consider the aging workforce as well, and they're a tool for you. So if they leave and you haven't captured their tribal knowledge, you're in a world of hurt, right? But what are the models that you can consider? Maybe some of those people, I just don't want to travel anymore, right? So how can we get their smarts and have them not travel and maybe even work part-time? Well, there's capability called augmented reality. So what if I have a junior technician in the field, right? And when they're having issues, right? I can't solve this more complex issue. They engage through augmented reality, one of your senior technicians who's sitting at home or sitting in an office and is looking at a video of what the technician's doing and is circling on their iPad or their computer saying, hey, no, pull out this tray here, remove this pin, replace the filter, right? Walk through that, and that can also support the documentation. So leveraging, and again, we're talking about bridging, right? Now we're bridging the junior and the senior technicians, right? You're getting those junior technicians up to speed that much faster, and you're giving them a resource to go to.
Great. Excellent. Look, guys, unfortunately, I think we're going to be sort of get chopped off the air in a few seconds or so. So, look, a couple of thoughts. I mean, I think this has been fascinating for me as an outsider. I think it's fascinating seeing the adoption, and it is so similar between industries. I'm a big believer in this idea of learning between industries. I think there is a lot we can learn from each other. But what you've heard, I guess, ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon is the thoughts of a wildlife manager, a journalist, and a marketing guy. So. An unusual combination, I guess, for this kind of conversation. But look,
sounds like the beginning of a joke.
It does really, doesn't it? Look, on a serious note, guys, thank you so much for giving up your time to come and do this. What's this morning for you, the afternoon for me over here in Scotland. But it's been absolutely fascinating. Mark McClure, thank you so much indeed. Rob Schaefer, thank you very much indeed for your time. Been absolutely fascinating. If you're happy to do so, do put your contact details. If you're happy to talk to people outside this, onto the chat room for people in case anybody has got any follow-up questions or anything. We'll leave the chat room open for a few minutes. A big thank you to ServiceNow for sponsoring today. It can't happen without these guys stepping up to the plate while we can't meet physically. So thank you very much indeed for doing that, ServiceNow. I know they've been listening in the background, I'm sure very interested. And my name is Hamish Taylor. It's been my pleasure to be with you this morning, and I look forward to a future session. But for the moment, thank you very much indeed, everybody. Thank you for listening in, and hopefully there's been one or two thoughts that you can take away from today's session. Thanks again, and goodbye, everybody.
Cheers.